Well, hello everyone. My name is Rhoda Moise. I also go by the name of Dr. Ro Wellness. I really believe in bridging the science and just our daily lives with prevention, just as the previous presenter mentioned. So if you will, if you're comfortable, please take a stand. And we're just going to start with some breath work, a little bit of stretching. I know it's the middle of the day. I'm the presentation before lunch, so I want to make sure you're still awake. So if we take a deep breath in and raise our arms above our heads. Beautiful. Exhale as we bend over to the left. Take a deep breath here, feeling that energy come up to the sides. Exhale, bend a little deeper. Inhale, come up. Beautiful. Exhale, switch the hands. Inhale, grow 2 inches. Exhale, bend over. Beautiful. Deep breath in, feeling the lungs on the side. Feel that stretch. Exhale, a little bit deeper. Inhale, come up. Exhale, slowly roll the wrists and the arms down as you take a seat. Beautiful. So now that we're connected to ourselves, our bodies, our breath, the collective, again, I'd like to thank Dr. Solomon and CEESP for inviting me back to present as a successful alumni of the program. So I'd like to start the presentation with just a Haitian proverb. It goes like this. Yon poisson qui mourit dans de l'eau, c'est pas noyer le noyer. That means in English, a fish that dies in water did not drown. So I just want this to be something we meditate on throughout the presentation, and we'll come back to it and I'll give a story about it as well. So, just wanting to share a bit about my trajectory. I earned my Bachelor's of Science for undergrad from the Pennsylvania State University, and I had minors in health policy as well as biology, and my major was biobehavioral health. Here you'll see me at the hub of Penn State with the university seal, so excited and eager to graduate and continue with my academic journey. But I want to remind you, whether you're in a master's program, a PhD program, a medical program, etc., to not forget about your undergraduate training and not forget about the peers that you've connected with there, as well as your mentors, because that truly laid the foundation for you to be where you are now. And just even to share a story is, I really got my first research experience in undergrad. My mentor, Dr. Rhoda Moise, invited me as an honors college student to go to Senegal, West Africa with her to conduct diabetes research, to understand how communities locally were able to prevent and control disease. Also, sharing some career tips and tidbits is to get connected with organizations in your respective fields, such as with public health, the American Public Health Association. Again, here you're going to be able to connect with not only peers that are, on the journey with you, that will become your colleagues, but also mentors who have sort of walked the journey ahead. So with my undergraduate experience with research, I shared one example with the diabetes management that I was able to do, understanding what's going on in Senegal, West Africa. I also had my own honors thesis that looked at diabetes prevention and control and Haitian immigrants living in Philadelphia, in addition to a number of other research opportunities. Now, that foundation really provided the justification for me to go directly into a PhD program for public health right out of my undergraduate degree. So I earned my PhD from the Department of Public Health Sciences from University of Miami Miller School of Medicine, and I studied prevention science and community health. Now, as we're going through our programs again, no matter what graduate program you're in, we know that first day, the acceptance, excitement comes, right? But I also encourage you to think about what kind of activities really support your overall wellness to keep you going through the program after you identify your why. So for me, for instance, I really have a green thumb. I enjoy the garden and really grew a balcony of plants while in graduate school. For me, it reminded me basic things such as I watered my plants, for me to water myself and drink water and get sun, just like the plants need as well. So again, just inviting you to think of how can you really be whole and well-rounded while you're going through these programs, especially during these trying times. So let's get into some more of the science with my dissertation that looked at Haitian women's barriers to cervical cancer prevention and control in both South Florida in relationship to the University of Miami's catchment area to also Big Haiti, the country itself. So my research design was with community-based participatory research, and it was a mixed method study. My first paper was quantitative in nature. The second was geospatial, and these two papers used the same data set. Essentially, the quantitative paper really looked at the profile of a woman who reported that she's never been screened for cervical cancer. That data was then inputted geographically, similar to the previous presentation, to visualize where these women who were at risk actually lived in South Florida, so we can have some place-based intervention. With that in mind, the results from those two studies really highlighted that it was women who were in the US for less than 5 years who reported that they did not have citizenship and also reported a perception that they didn't have access to routine care, who were less likely to report that they've ever been screened. And so we talked a bit about that and can understand what the implications of that might be. So further, to dive deeper, I wanted to understand sort of what was the context in Haiti, where these people were coming from, these women were coming from, to see how we can understand truly how to prevent and control cervical cancer. So that's where CEESP came in and was able to help support and fund my qualitative research in Haiti. And again, all three of these papers came together to really look at cervical cancer prevention through the lens of screening. So I'll talk in a little bit more detail about the qualitative portion as related to CEESP. So here you see me in the field really facilitating a group session for consenting participants. So understanding how to even consent people is really interesting in different contexts. So in 2019, that's when I graduated, and that was my season with CEESP. But the way I approached consent was to invite women for a light lunch, for about 2 hours to go into the details of what the study actually was, and then to train them to use digital cameras. So the methodology of my study was Photovoice. Just by show of hands, who's familiar with Photovoice? Okay, sweet. Can you tell us a bit more of what you know about Photovoice?
Sure, yeah, it's a CVPR approach and qualitative in nature, but typically you go through a little bit of training with your participants, and then you give them the digital camera or whatever medium they're using, and then you give them like a question or like an idea or a topic of something and ask them to go in their communities and take a picture of something that resonates with that topic or whatever the question may be. I've seen this for like community health assessments, understanding what barriers are in your community or what assets your community has, things like that that I've seen it used for. I was on a Photovoice project for recovering addicts who were attending my undergraduate institution, and so they took photos of things that helped them like through their recovery on campus, and so they kind of created a community based on what supports them in their recovery process while being on campus, where in undergrad that's a partying scene most of the time, and so that was a really cool project to be on.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well said. And so that I was like, wait, she's answering this so perfectly, so it makes sense that you've had personal experience with it. Fabulous. So precisely, that's what you see me doing here. This image was actually captured by a participant training to use the camera. And what was really powerful was that I had 25 women for saturation. None of the women have used digital cameras before. So very, very powerful tool. So here I'm just highlighting, with this being a women's health study, a number of Haitian women who've really been paramount in helping Haiti to become what it is today and continue to transform. So the prompt that the women had with this study was to capture an image that resonated with the idea of a barrier that they had to accessing care. So just also touching on a methodology is the Penn 3 cultural model, which really puts culture at the nexus of understanding how we approach global health. So wanting to introduce this model to people who are thinking of, again, publishing. A lot of journals do like to see that there's some type of theoretical model driving your analysis. So again, you're welcome to explore that some more. So study location was in Artibonite, Haiti, which is the largest department in Haiti. And recruitment took place in collaboration with a midwife, Mrs. Fafan El-Sizit. And so I mentioned this yesterday, just the importance with qualitative research to have someone sort of come together with you as you're doing the analysis to corroborate the results. And it's really powerful if that person in this context had a hand in collecting the data. So the eligibility for this was women who, again, were 25 to 65 years old and unscreened for HPV in the last 3 years. Someone mentioned this earlier, how just even in understanding the global context, pap smears may not be readily accessible to everyone. And so in Haiti, that's not quite the gold standard due to accessibility, and so we use VIA, visual inspection by acetic acid. And so that was an important differentiation in the data set here with this qualitative study compared to what was available in the US, where pap smear was the gold standard. But a limitation of that data set is that it didn't ask about being screened with VIA. So again, as we do these cross-cultural studies, it's important to understand not only gold standards for health and medical treatment and assessment, but also the context of what accessibility also plays out to be. So as beautifully described, I use Photovoice, and just to talk a little bit more about what that looked like, is that the participants were given 5 days to capture at least 5 images. And then we had brief semi-structured interviews where women were able to talk about the images they captured. And because it was like relatively a sensitive topic and also asking people to really engage as artists and share their work, I decided to have individual one-on-one interviews first so that everyone had a voice. Then, following that, I invited women into 2 groups, focus groups, to be able to sort of discuss in more detail what was represented in the images while analyzing with Ms. Fafan El-Sizit, my collaborator. So I'm happy to share that the paper has been published and it is readily accessible online. And also, again, just a big shout out to CEESP and Dr. Solomon for being able to be a participant in this amazing fellowship program that supported this work. So you may be wondering, all right, so what are the results? So here are some highlights. Again, all of these images were taken directly from the cameras behind the lens, the women themselves. And that to me was really important, to be able to have women share their stories. So one of the overwhelming responses was really the speculum for a barrier to screening. So I'll read just a participant quote. And so again, this is the typical format of how you present Photovoice research, is you have the image and the caption describes what's going on in the image. And in this instance, these are the women's voices themselves. One participant noted, when you see this, you're asking, will it hurt? Whoosh, I'm going to be uncomfortable. I don't think I'll be able to do it. Where will they put it? You say all these things, do you understand? And so implications of this really is to provide some more connection to this process so women are understanding sort of what even goes on. And then too, to be real, no matter the context, this is not quite the most comfortable experience for any woman, right? And so to be able to have women, whether it's share alternatives, there's new technology coming out that may transform how pap smears are even collected, right? So to understand the implications of these kinds of results, to be able to not only educate but also empower women. Any comments, questions on this part?
I have a comment.
Surely.
This is really, really interesting, and this is definitely something I've, read and kind of discussed in my dissertation, thinking about, because one of my variables is disability status, and oftentimes women are able to use a speculum because of a disability, or maybe they don't know how to make the right accommodations when they go to have their pap test, and so I think it's really interesting also because the guidelines, especially in the U.S. for cervical cancer screening, have changed so much and very frequently, and just changed in the last year from the American Cancer Society. So now they're recommending that you just get a high-risk HPV test every 5 years instead of a screening at all, a pap test at all. And so it's interesting how it's like, in some ways, there's a lot of pushback on that because not everybody has access to those high-risk tests, but then you see things like this, and especially across cultures and even in the U.S., that there are still those barriers to using a speculum in a traditional examination. But then there's the, it's kind of a catch-22 with not having full access to HPV testing. So it's just interesting, all those factors that kind of play into each other. And yeah, it was not a question, but more.
It's all good. I really like discussion if you haven't picked up on that. So this is really powerful. You bring me beautifully into the next image where a barrier was travel, particularly an example was travel by boat. So a participant's story reads, life is expensive and you don't have a job. You can't be risking your life on the ocean like this. The life of the person is in danger. Someone can take the little boat to go across, but if there was a center right here, it would be much easier. So almost in conversation with your comment is this response of allowing women to, or in general, participants, these vulnerable communities that we're seeking to support in their health and wellness, allow them to drive and guide the conversation. Because say access is a challenge, then imagine if there is a seasonal, as women suggested in this study, a seasonal clinic where they would have direct access locally. So they wouldn't have the time of transportation, the risk and safety of transportation as barriers. So beautiful comment. Again, this is a discussion. So as things come up, please do share. And I'll share one more finding of the study, was that a barrier to cervical cancer screening was group consultation. And so in this image, I'll share the caption. When people come in for gynecological consultation, there are so many people. They don't see them one by one, but they take them by group in order to meet everyone's needs. And so that's just a sample of the caption. And thinking of, again, cross-cultural understanding and capacity, is that we wouldn't even think about this as a situation in the United States with generally HIPAA and things of that nature. Whereas, again, resource limited in this sense is something to consider and see how we can overcome these barriers while understanding the structural issues that take root to create this situation. So overall, the study results really helped identify targets for public health intervention. It was really powerful because I collaborated not only with Ms. Fafan LCZ in order to collect the data, but I was in direct connection with the executive director of Zamila Sante in Haiti to be able to have the access. Also understanding that I was in communication and connection with the overarching executive for women's health in Zamila Sante. And so they helped me even be able to identify where in Haiti to conduct this study, to have the social capital of connection to a nurse to be able to go in and do this work. Touching on what we talked about yesterday, even if you might be from the area, the country, have a personal connection, it's still different when you have the infrastructure to do it. Imagine if I just showed up with cameras like, hey, I'm trying to do a study. Sounds cool, but may not really gain traction in the way that it did because I was able to connect and collaborate with an organization already established on the ground with support of a US-based institution. So just highlighting those dynamics. So if you're interested in learning more about the study, the paper, again, is published, and I'm happy to also dialogue and discuss some more. So moving a bit deeper with my research experience, beyond my doctoral training, I went on to complete a postdoctoral fellowship at Fox Chase Cancer Center in the Department of Cancer Prevention and Control. There I was able to secure a T32 training grant as well as a U54 pilot grant. So again, this helped me not only develop my grant writing skills, but also fine-tune some of my statistical analysis skills. So powerfully, I was able to, in that same space, be able to work on publishing my dissertation. So as you're looking for postdocs, if that's a stage that you're in, make sure to have the conversation of what your time might look like to be able to get this work that you're doing with CEESP into the scientific realm of publication, because it is still a very critical measure that people consider when looking at your scientific productivity. So again, that was a blessing to be able to have the support to do that type of work. And I completed that postdoc after a year and have transitioned into the private sector, where I work as the director of patient-centered care and education with an amazing company called RESE, that stands for Research, Education, and Social Solutions Incorporated. And just again, the power of being in touch and communicating your needs, I was able to get the statistical paper that I talked about published with not only the support of people from the University of Miami, where the research started, but also continuing to my postdoc, where my mentor is also on that paper, and also again having the time and ability to get that done while I've transitioned into the private sector. So up next for me, forthcoming strategies, future plans, really is to continue doing the work to empower communities to live their healthiest lives. I envision doing that through my science, which really integrates science, health, and policy to understand how systems operate, from providers, payers, even the patient, of course, themselves, guiding the process to understand how we achieve health equity. Also, my artistry really does serve as a channel for that balance. I look at gardening as artistry, right? And further is really using education as a tool. Really, my teaching philosophy focuses on centering communication and creativity. So what was awesome also about my experience as a postdoc was I was able to teach. And so I was able to develop my own content based off of the syllabus and be able to communicate that in a virtual space, which is critically important in our ever-changing technological world. I'm also a certified yoga teacher, and so being able to just really merge my science, my art, and education skills into one package is my future plan. It's happening now, and I'm continuing to grow on that as well. So just wanting to share some some tidbits, some insight for career planning and life lessons that I've learned along the way is that really you have to be well in order to do well. And so mental health, physical health, social, communal, career, all those elements make up wellness, and it's so critically important to take care. Additionally, is community really cultivates creativity. So as you see, just being in conversation with each other throughout these couple of days sparks connections, sparks ideas, really sparks collaboration. So continue to cultivate your community. Additionally, experience is essential. So just in communication throughout yesterday, I talked with some of you and who said, okay, well, I've had this experience, and from that I learned I did not want to continue down this path, so now I'm doing this. And that's so important. Experience is essential. I like to say that it's as important to know what you don't want to do as it is to know what you do want to do. So continue to really gain as much experience as you can. In that, failure is fallacy. I don't believe in the word failure. I believe that it's just an opportunity to learn. So to just really transform what you think failure as, to be able to overcome that. And finally is to just really have your why, to identify what keeps you committed to prevention science, public health, cancer research, whatever it is, find your why. For me, again, it's empowering communities to live their healthiest lives. So once you have that identified, it really helps you understand that no matter what comes in your path, you'll be able to prevail. So here are some references used throughout the presentation. We're just almost at lunchtime, so leaving some time and space for questions, comments, or concerns. Here's also my contact information. And just to close the loop with this quote, I know we are adapting to a virtual world and ways we connect with people, but this quote came to me as a gift walking back to where I was staying in Haiti during my CEESP experience and overhearing a conversation where someone shared this quote. And just, again, everyday life. And I walked back with that and just meditated on it, and it just really provided such a powerful metaphor for public health, prevention science, and again, community health, understanding that we're all in the same ocean, so to speak. And if some fish are dying more than others, it's not because the fish drowned. We have to figure out the true systemic issues that are driving that so we can address it. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moise. This is great. We can take a couple of questions and continue the discussion after lunch.
A couple of comments I want to share with you, Dr. Moise. You know, overall, I like your presentation. It's a very powerful illustration of your personal journey as a former CEESP participant. And when you were mentioning failure as a fallacy, that resonated with me very well. When I was graduating from University of Chicago with my PhD in sociology, initially I was trying to enter a sociology degree program as a faculty, and I got some interview opportunities, but most of them rejected me. That was the first time I think about, well, would I be a good fit for sociology degree program as a faculty, despite the fact that I received a PhD in sociology. And then that makes me think about, medical sociology, because back then, my dissertation is about early life experience, how that might relate to longevity in old age. So then I think about, South Texas. I contacted the State University there, right on the border between Texas and Mexico. It turned out they do have a vacancy. Their sociology program is one of the weakest in the nation. But as a demographer, I know this is going to be important, future issue, because the trend is there will be more Hispanics in Texas and Hispanic related health disparity issue would be important. So I did my interview there. They gave me the position. It's pretty much a teaching university, which is not something I usually want as a PhD from University of Chicago. But I went there, I did my work, and I was also serving as a director of the South Texas Border Health Disparity Center with funding support from CDC. Then later I transferred to Nebraska when they have a vacancy there. I think when you were mentioning failure is a fallacy, I think that would also resonate with many of you, because when you are in the job market, when you are trying to submit a paper, failure is the norm. When you are trying to submit a grant application, failure is usually the norm, and it's a test of your personal resilience and whether you can be adaptive. So learn how to cope with the failure and be adaptive. Have a long-term vision, as also Dr. Chamberlain was mentioning. It's really, really important. So that's my first comment about it. Your failure is a fallacy, argument. And the second one is also very appealing to me is when you're mentioning how you can integrate art in public health. Our center did a workshop on violence prevention, or how we can address violence and crime as a public health issue. And one of the great ideas from my GA, who was a former police officer in Omaha, was why not we collaborate with a local gallery in downtown Omaha to host this community event whereby we can showcase our interview transcript with local African American mothers who live in high crime area, who have their sons enrolled in the local gang prevention program. And also we did a lot of interviews with former inmates from the same neighborhood, trying to give the public a sense of their life journey so that they would realize that homicide or robbery is not just a number mentioned in the police report, but there are actually life experience, life journey behind each of those numbers. So after we did all those interviews in the community, we thought what would be the best strategy for us to share all these findings, insights from these participants with the public. And the genius idea from my GA was the former police officer, managed to connect with the local gallery. So then beyond that, we also have some actors who are from the African American neighborhood. They place our roles like interviewer, some of them were acting as the former inmate or African American mother. So they would present this like in a theater, almost like a Broadway,
like a play,
show. And then the event was very well attended by local media, by academia, by neighborhood representatives. And the next day, we did observe quite a few news media reports about this event. Why it is important for people to know about the story behind crime and persistence of crime and the life journey those people have gone through. So definitely there is a great place for art in public health. It's about how you build partnership and make good use of that. So thank you for making that connection.
Most definitely. You bring up 2 points I didn't get to share. One is, let me go backwards with the art piece, was that the Photovoice results, I was actually invited after graduating back to the University of Miami to showcase the results throughout the university's libraries as a form of dissemination. So it's essentially an art exhibit throughout the university. Think about when you go to the library, there's pictures, there's paintings, there's informational, it's an educational exhibit across the university's libraries. So again, really think about the creative ways that you can include art in your work. And then also, expanding on failure is a fallacy. I stand here, sort of on the other side of my CEESP experience and just thinking back to when I was in your seats literally 2 years ago and understanding that, it was a journey. I stand here, cheerfully with gratitude, but I also want to keep it real. Like, there was a point I was like, I don't know if this is actually going to happen in Haiti. Maybe I'll have to, transform my study and do it locally in South Florida for the qualitative Photovoice part. Like, I want to be transparent and share that. Dr. Solomon's nodding his head because I had a couple conversations with him, like, I don't know, like, the IRB is being held up, the data service use agreement is being held up, there's political turmoil in the country. I don't know if I could fly there and be safe and just be able to have the access. All these things were playing in the background, but again, I didn't look at that as failure because I had the community, the support of Dr. Solomon, my dissertation committee, my peers in the program to really push forward. So again, thank you for your comments, wanting to just wrap around it and really sort of tie the bow on that conversation to really highlight those 2 points.
Thank you. That was great. So let's go to lunch with